Welcome back. Let's turn now to the Middle East, where the World Health Organization is trying to gain access to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis as Israeli troops continue to raid the facility where hundreds of civilians are trapped. The Israeli army says they've arrested more than 20 terrorists in Nasser Hospital. Authorities say the situation is catastrophic there. At least 5 patients died because of failure of the power generators and oxygen supply system amid Israel's precise and limited incursion. The health ministry in Gaza is reporting at least 28,775 people have been killed since the October 7 attack and over 68,000 injured. French President Emmanuel Macron says Israeli invasion of Rafah with 1.4 million Palestinians sheltering there could only lead to an unprecedented humanitarian disaster and would be a turning point in the conflict. As hostilities escalate in the city, hospitals are under pressure and struggling to cope with the surge of patients.
Just established field hospitals, when they opened, they expected to have 200 patients per day. Very quickly, they received between 600 and 700 patients a day, of which 40% is trauma. Trauma is by far the biggest component. Even in the short period we have been the last hour, we saw a number of ambulances rushing in with the most severe trauma cases. This hospital here in Rafah is a very well functional field hospital from IMC, 70 plus beds, a willingness to expand with another 150 beds. We have seen this, of course, with other hospitals. When military activities come close to an hospital, staff cannot attend the hospital, patients cannot access the hospital, WHO cannot bring in their supplies, and the hospital very quickly becomes partially functional, barely functional, and non-functional. This is one of the hospitals we need, and we need to keep it for a long time.
In the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will continue to oppose international recognition of a Palestinian state, warning it could prevent the settlement of the conflict in Gaza. Mr. Netanyahu shared his views in a post on social media, which partly reads, "The recognition of a Palestinian state would give a huge reward to unprecedented terrorism." His comments come after talking with U.S. President Joe Biden and Israeli cabinet meeting, as well as a Washington Post report that the United States and its Arab allies plan to promote a two-state resolution to the ongoing Middle East conflict. According to the Washington Post, the proposal reportedly involves a ceasefire, the release of hostages held by Hamas, and a firm timeline for the establishment of a Palestinian state. And that could be announced as early as the next several weeks. And the row between South Africa and Israel is far from over. South Africa's Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor blasted Israel's spokesperson for accusing her government of representing the interests of Hamas terrorist organization. In response, Ms. Pandor said the insults are the last resort of a scoundrel. Ms. Pandor, who is in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa, attending the Africa Unit Summit, said the international community has a responsibility to bring the Israel-Gaza conflict to an end, adding that the world needs to prepare for a two-state solution. Relations between Israel and South Africa have been tense since South Africa filed a case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, a charge it's rejected. Former Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland and the United Nations in Geneva, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, joins us now on the program. Ambassador Ayalogu, great to have you on The World Today. This comment by the Israeli Prime Minister is rather indicting. It indicates that there is more to this Hamas offensive than the Israeli government is explaining.
Yes, good evening. Well, of course, we know there are a lot of complexities in this matter. We know the position of Israel. They say they want to see the total end of Hamas, which they have pursued for some time. Incidentally, it has led to a huge, horrendous humanitarian challenge. Women, children dead, killed. And so many other things that have, offended the sensitivities of the free world. And apparently the Israeli government is not even listening again to some of its backers, because there's a general feeling now that it's about time that there should be a ceasefire so that humanitarian assets will flow, go to people who need it, and so that real peace talks can start. Because at the end of the day, that's what will bring a solution to the crisis. So we see it's. I just see the statements by the Israeli Prime Minister as one of these statements that really make things rather difficult.
Indeed, it makes things rather difficult. And we've been hearing from the Palestinians, well, not from the Palestinian side, but, those who study the history between Israel and Palestine saying, that the Palestinian people really do not want the existence of an Israeli state. The Hamas does not want the existence of an Israeli state. Its mission is to completely annihilate Israel in order for a Palestinian state to exist. But do you think the existence of a state of Palestine will be a threat to Israel's existence?
Well, I think that there is no other alternative but a two-state solution. That means that there will be the two-state sovereign with territorial delineation. So that's the end, because that is the ultimate expectation, and one can't see any other way. Of course, both sides are rattling sabers. They don't want the other to exist. They don't want the other to exist, but can never be the way to resolve it. The only way is this two-state solution. Just that it needs, because of the way they feel about each other, their past and the more recent conflagrations, there has to be a third party, at the ombudsman, the UN, and agencies or entities must guarantee securities. But I believe that once it's all agreed, the two-state solution is agreed, then the issue of delineating territory and sovereignty, which might require quite a lot of negotiation, because I think Israel needs some land and they want to encroach in land that were Palestinian for some time. But with real negotiation and both sides being realistic, that can be resolved. And once we get each state, they have to live side by side. There would be assurances, there would be guarantees. Peace may not quickly emerge, but it would eventually, because that's just what they have to. That's what they have to live with.
I know that this issue of a two-state solution, this is not the first time it's been proposed. As over the years, it has been, as both sides interact and Israel interacts with her neighbors, it's been a major issue that has come up even before the late Yasser Arafat died. Leaders are now discussing what will happen to post-war Gaza when the Israeli offensive is over, that is, whenever it is over. What would you suggest as regards governance and administration of Gaza? Because to some analysts, Israel intends to take over the Gaza Strip with this offensive.
Well, if we admit what Israel wants, that is to take over Gaza, we must admit also that would not be the end of the story, because there would be the simmering discontent will continue. So there may be a temporary arrangement. It depends on who wins, and we can see Israel pounding, beating up everybody around that, and probably being declared as a winner, and probably might impose certain things. But whatever is imposed that doesn't admit what we might call Palestinian interest to be free to live on their own, not to be dominated by Israel, will still, will not be a solution. It will still lead to future conflagration. So, bottom line is still the two-state arrangement. If Gaza is decided that it would be either totally be on one side or split into two somehow, then everybody will know where each party stand.
I'm looking, at the screen. I see that my producers have up a video of a humanitarian situation in Gaza. These are hundreds of people who have moved to, I believe, a UN settlement. It's supposed to provide some haven for them, in Gaza. And there are thousands of people there, very limited resources. I mean, even though you can see aid coming in, but you can tell it's really not enough. The attention of the world has now been drawn to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The French president said we're looking at a catastrophe possibly happening, in the area. And we've talked about this all week, how to prevent this from really blowing up beyond what it is already. How difficult will it be, Ambassador, to navigate not creating this humanitarian catastrophe that's about to happen, and then Israel continuing with its offensive in Gaza? Is it even possible?
Well, it's really difficult to see a situation where Israel does not get, finish this to what he believes is logical end. That is the total, I don't know whether I would say decimation of Hamas. Of course, we know that means quite a lot of other Palestinians. But at the end of the day, the only way to prevent further escalation and the tensions we anticipate and that would definitely happen, is already happening, is that the aggression must stop. The attempt to break down houses, regardless of whether they are hospitals or anywhere, under the excuse that they are locations of Hamas, must stop definitely, so that we can begin to sort things out and provide humanitarian assistance to the huge population everywhere that need it, and it's beginning to overwhelm even the humanitarian agencies that are supposed to help. So, bottom line is that the violence, the armed conflict must sort of stop, so that an attempt at bringing peace and humanitarian assistance can commence, take effect.
Well, in relation to the Israeli offensive in Gaza, South Africa's Foreign Minister, Naledi Pandor, has accused the Israeli government accused her own government of representing the interests of Hamas. She's rejected the implication, of the Israeli government that, her government is representing the interest of Hamas. She's been pretty vocal against Israel, even went as far as the ICJ the day of the announcement of the ruling on South Africa's petition against Israel. Do you think that she represents the position and interest of South Africa regarding the war? And what do you make of the position, though?
Well, South Africa has explained its position. It sees what is going on with regard to relations between Israel and Palestine as something similar to what their country went through. You know, the apartheid, the attempt to muzzle or almost prevent, knock out of existence the blacks who were in South Africa. So it's always at the back of that the South African government, and that has pushed or driven or possibly also justified their actions in bringing this matter to court. Because look at it this way: it's so difficult for the world, global community, to just sit back and see the kind of rules that bind us together now, that is respect for human lives, being disregarded by one country that seems to, with some justification about what happened, but then with a sledgehammer approach to the issue, acts in certain ways, breaking a few rules. So definitely that's where the South African government is coming from. We also understand if the Israeli government is not happy with that, from what we see, they're only happy with anybody who either supports or keeps quiet. It's not surprising that their target of in vitriolic verbiage is what's going on now. And South Africa has denounced the Israelis' position that South Africa is pushing Hamas interest, which I doubt personally, when we understand where South Africa is coming from.
Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, thank you so much for joining us on The World today. Always appreciate your thoughts and analysis on the program.
Thank you.